get ready for our next reading. I assume that folks who have gone for a little bit of a break will trickle back in. And if you'd like to find a seat, that's great. And if you want to walk around and hear the reading, that's great too. Poetry's a raucous thing. Our next reading is going to be chaired by Patricia Hope Scanlan and will feature Paolo, Javier, Elinor, Nauen, and Rona, Cran. Thank you all again so much for coming, and thank you, Patricia. And I now welcome Patricia. Thank you all.
Hello, and good afternoon, everybody. And I'm very honored to be here as a sort of interloper, so much not a New Yorker, and so it's such an honor to be in such an alive dialogue about poetry in New York and in America. And I thought, oh, that word America was really quiet today, and because it really is, I think, really central for me, my understanding of the New York School. It's all about also the beauty and the mesmerizing nature of America. And I've been over here because I've brought out the second edition of John Wiener's Ace of Pentacles, and which is called Pente, a book of woe, and so it's again interesting to see his name popped up a little bit today. So that's my context, and I've also translated John Ashbery. We did poems by his friend and lover, Pierre Martyry, whose work was known in English, but the French didn't know it at all. And so we did it, John Ashbery did it to throw light in France on Pierre as a poet in English and in French. And I've done work with the poet Lee Harwood, again a lover of John Ashbery's, and so I keep working with these great American poets and being inspired by the work. And now we're going to have the pleasure of hearing some poets, and then like that, it's I was interested that Rona had organized an event, a brilliant event in London, and Charles Bernstein came, and he came up and started the event saying, well, I've been to a lot of schools in New York. I've been and so he was playing again with the idea of the New York School. We're going to start with Elinor Nauen, and Elinor is with Norwegian roots, and she has also lived in Dakota, and so that is brings a special element to her work, and it's not even Dakota, but it's actually South Dakota. And Elinor has a wonderful magazine. Elinor, would you like to come up? The title of the magazine is called The Jew...
which is a Norwegian word that literally means Christmas table, but it's also the word for the office party, the Christmas party in Norway, and where anything goes. So that's the connotation.
And she's just brought out the second edition, and another poet who was to be here today, but sadly wasn't able to turn up because of the political environment at the moment, is Jordan Davis. And so Elinor is going to read a poem that appears in the magazine by the first issue of the magazine, and I'm also going to read two of his poems to represent his work today.
But we're not starting with Jordan. I'm starting with... Okay. So because Jordan and John Yao couldn't be here, Patricia asked me to, besides reading my poetry, I'm going to start with an essay that and I have copies of Eula Board, so if you want a copy, just hit me up. Oh, how's the sound? Good. So this is called Everything Turns into Writing, and it was written in slightly different form for No More Secrets, the poetry project in the 1980s, a panel at a 2012 conference on poetry and poetics of the 1980s at the National Poetry Foundation, University of Maine. It was published in Local Knowledge in 2020. Wow, I feel like that's like the longest intro I've ever... Okay, so Everything Turns into Writing. The Poetry Project in the 80s was a time when we weren't, or felt we weren't, under scrutiny. So here was a freedom that fueled a lot of poetry. We had magazines and they looked alike because they were all done on a Mimeo with no choice of font. Your poems looked like Eileen's and Alice's and Ashbury's and Ron's and mine. We weren't distracted by production values or by career possibilities. We didn't imagine a career in poetry. Even those with great ambition didn't see how that might work out. No matter how serious you were about poetry, there just weren't careers at that point. No one thought they would make a living as a poet. There was definitely the feeling that you had to choose between poetry and a straight life. We rejected a straight life, of course. You didn't have a career, you were a poet. A lot of my posse of poets didn't go to college or dropped out or went to third-rate schools. We wanted to be the raw and untrained genius who wrote our works of raw genius on the way to the reading. It was similarly uncool to have a beautifully produced book. The overall aesthetic of the late 70s into the 80s was to be amateur, casual, rough punk, and that permeated the project. If you had a perfect bound book, you either had money or a mainstream publisher, and no one respected that. The Poetry Project in the 80s was somewhat of an outlaw culture, fueled by amphetamines and heroin. We thought anything could happen at a reading. Here's a few sentences from a story called Radar Love by Johnny Stanton, which was published in Transfer, edited by Gary Lenhard in 1989-90 issue. Quote, "He opened the parish hall door. Lots of people were already inside, waving to each other and laughing out loud. Everyone talked at once. What was going on in the poetry world? Who slept with whom? The latest big fight. Changing sexual affiliations. That awful article in The Voice. Censorship. The New York Times. Sun and Moon Press. The Yale Poetry Prize. People drifted outside for air, beer, and cigarettes. The night had dipped into a great circle. Talk, talk, talk." Unquote. In the story, the reading by Alice Notley leads to sex, a road trip, and death. Anything could happen in poetry. Talk, 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 and collaborate. I remember Gary Snyder saying that in the 50s, he and others would hitchhike for days to have a conversation with someone of like mind. That was easier to find in the 70s and 80s, but there was definitely the sense that it had to be found in New York City. It was pre-internet, after all, when it seemed hit or miss to find anything, poems, poets, a home. Therefore, people wanted to live in New York, and poetry was a cool way to be here. We mostly lived near St. Mark's Church and near each other, proximity, as Nick was saying, and didn't have to work that much to maintain our $100 a month apartments. So we were in and out of each other's lives all the time. The atmosphere of poetry was at least as important as any particular poem, that we were all poets doing poetry all the time. If we had a theory, it was that everyone was a poet, or could be, or should be, and that art was produced by the many, not the individual. Talk, 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 and collaborate. There were exquisite corpses tossed off at every party, or as a way to seduce the poets you liked. Maureen Owen wrote many rengas by mail with a long list of poets. There was the collaboration that is good translation, like Ron Padgett's Reverdee. Artists such as George Schneemann worked frequently with poets, and there were Bob Holman's Poets Theater Festivals, as well as the Poets Theater Monthly series that ran from 1985 to 88 at the project. There was an insane amount of the traditional competition, as Ted Berrigan called it in an interview with Tom Savage, where you tried to inspire or force each other to do your absolute best. This carried across the generations. Schuyler with Paget, Toll with O'Hara, Waldman with Miles. One favorite of mine is Susan Cataldo and Susie Timmons' Masters of Suspense, about which Susie wrote, "When Susan and I read Masters of Suspense at the Poetry Project, our dear friend Ann Ruppel participated by singing an eerie, theremin-esque tune after each repetition of the chorus. We are the masters of suspense. We are the masters of suspense." You guys remember that. I feel really lucky to have belonged to a time, place, and community where sharing such amusements was a commonplace occurrence among friends. A huge way poets collaborated was in bands. In the 80s, a lot of poets moved over to music. Maggie Dupree, Barbara Barg, Mike Sapol, Lenny Goldstein, Tom Carey. It had happened before, the Fugs, Patti Smith. But at the project, a lot of the readings were actually bands playing. As a result, there was far more of a poetry-music connection than previously, and there have been poet bands ever since, along with spoken word over music. This has kept going in part due to technology. You can make your own CD cheaply, equivalent to putting out a Mimeo magazine. Maggie Dupree told me that she came from rock and roll to poetry, not the other way around. We may have been the first generation to do that, she said. Earlier generations were already adults while we were teens when psychedelic came into rock. Rock was poetry and it was presented as such. Jim Morrison, Dylan, Leonard Cohen. That wild visionary poetry was very compelling, Maggie said. It drew us into music, and then there was punk. You didn't have to play well. Everyone was in a band. I want to emphasize the importance of the innumerable magazines and small presses, The World, Mag City, Cough, Telephone, 432 Review, Angel Hair Transfer, United Artists, Misty Terrace Press, Adventures in Poetry. Magazines were communal. Your poems bumped up next to others. You chose the work, so you had to read and consider and evaluate your peers. The first generation, here I'm just saying that word so much, the first generation of O'Hara, Guest, Koch, Ashbury, Schuyler, Denby were just fucking around. Even the name, the New York School, was a goof, Michael Lally said to me recently. They weren't exclusive, they were embraced by all and embraced all. Later it was more groups banding together as their own crew with their own theories, finding a justification for a kind of poetry they liked and that suited their aptitudes. The second generation, and I divide the generations not by age as much as by when they began publishing, the 1950s for the first, the 60s for the second, the 70s to 80s for the third. And in fact, many of the emerging poets in the workshop I taught last fall at the project were older than me, and all this so-called generation stuff, as Ansel Bergen called it, is largely arbitrary. The second generation New York School, well, you know, this is all stuff you've heard a million times. I'm not just gonna, there's just a bunch of names, which have all been said today. The force of Ted Berrigan's personality can't be underestimated. When he died in 1983, I remember Harris Schiff saying, 100 people are gonna say their best friend just died. He was the reason many people came to and or stayed around the project. Ted dying was a fulcrum point, Lal told me. He was a connection to the first generation, a teacher, leader, and guru to the third. He was a unifying factor at St. Mark's. When he died, what kept those disparate groups connected was missing. After he died, the church opened up in a way to more influences than just O'Hara and Berrigan. It seemed, because I was among them, that there were an awful lot more of us in what was loosely referred to as the third generation New York school. Some poets I knew in the 80s at the project who are still around are Maggie Dupree, Joel Lewis, Tom Savage, Greg Masters, John Yao, Bob Rosenthal, Patricia Spears-Jones, David Trinidad Sparrow, John Godfrey, Simon Pettit, and Steve Levine. Some talented writers are no longer around or never became as prominent as their work should have made them. A few died young: Steve Carey, Michael Skolnick, Susan Cataldo, Tim Dlugos, Elio Schneeman. Some either dropped away: Simon Schuckett, Regina Beck, Chris Caddison, Mike Slater, David Hers, Neil Hackman, or never have entirely gotten their due: Don Yorty, Bill Zavatsky, Bill Kushner, Cliff Feynman. Susie Timmons won the first Ted Berrigan Award and didn't publish another book for 25 years. Because of that casual approach to a literary career, many good writers were underpublished and underrated. It didn't help that we were more interested in poetry than theory about poetry or criticism. Reviews of books in the Poetry Project newsletter were pretty much always raves, more like announcements than serious engagement. Today, and this is 10 years ago, the Poetry Project has something like 80 readings a year with hundreds of poets and a remarkably broad aesthetic. As Stacy Smazik, former artistic director of the project, said, "Who could I dare single out to be representative or prevailing?" I think my generation wants to incorporate all of the various lineages of the new American poetry, as well as some more mainstream lineages. The Poetry Project isn't as associated with a small group of young people these days anymore. We have to acknowledge that the Poetry Project isn't a clubhouse in the 21st century, because that type of organization won't survive. But the Poetry Project has survived for over half a century, I guess because poets keep showing up and because poetry still happens and still matters. So. And I just wanted to say that we all loved Frank O'Hara, but we just felt like he was so on a pedestal that it was our job to knock the clay feet off. Anyway, and now I'll stop defending my fuck Frank O'Hara thing. So now I'm going to read my poetry, right? Okay. We worked this out in great detail, and then I totally couldn't remember what order everything was happening. Okay, so now I'm going to actually read some poems that I'm going to start with a few that were kind of from the time we've just been talking about, and then read some more recent work. I'm going to read the title poem from this book, American Guys, that was published by Hanging Loose in 1997, I think. American Guys. Jack, John, Ben, and I play pool, Polish bar, 7th Street. How is it guys all know how to shoot pool? I sure don't. Hit 'em low, Ben says. I sink 3 in a row. Never done that before. Johnny walks in. I light up. Jack, John, and Ben drink beer. Johnny, ale. Are we solid? I ask again. That goes on your tombstone, John says. I swill Rolling Rock. No one smokes, but the bar is smoky. The bartender throws quarters in the jukebox. I dance alone. Satisfaction. I never had so many boyfriends until I got married. They love me for being happy elsewhere. Jack scratches. I used to know how to play this game, he says. Johnny hits him hard. He too's done this before. I let the guys tell me what to do next. For once, I'm the girl. They line him up. I love American Guys, saved from knowing anything except keep one elbow up, skittering toward a side pocket. And now I'm going to read the title poem of this. And it's a good thing I didn't pick out the title poem of So Late Into the Night, because it's a 140-page poem in ottava rima. You really would be here for an hour and 40 minutes, just with me. Okay, but this is from Now That I Know Where I'm Going. Now that I know where I'm going. I'll never be a junkie because I can't stand menthol cigarettes. A novelist since I sleep like a fat pink pig. I'll never be a speed freak because I hide the bottle and forget where it is. A great lover because I make jokes in bed. When I dress for success, they send me to the moon till I remember there's a game on, and I'll never be a big home run hitter for the Sox. Why not? Why not? Because I throw like a girl and I can't hit the ball. If I go get the operation that gives me great cheekbones, I'll still have to get the one that puts my eyes farther apart, and I'll still never be a great actress because I only know how to faint and disrobe. I'll never live in Paris because the French live there. I'll never have a baby because they'd never let me name her Fort. I can't be a milkman because people would make rude jokes, or a garbage man because I couldn't stand to throw all that perfectly good stuff away. I'll never be queen for a day because they took it off the air. So suck my dick, and I don't even have one. And since so if you know me at all, you know I'm a big baseball fan, and the World Series started last night, and so I'm going to read a poem, a baseball-related poem that was also in American Guys. How Hans Became an American. I've been sitting at my desk a lot, staring at my father. It's a picture taken in summer, a few months before he died. He's looking at me with a wry and knowing, did he know, expression. He looks like a man who needs a private joke to get a proper snapshot. He's looking straight at me, even as I sit in a cold May, a little too tired, the Yanks getting beat 4-1 in the fifth by Oakland out on the coast, a lackluster, they'll never catch up game. Rasmussen not getting shellacked, just doesn't have anything, and neither do the hitters. Gone native in his Arizona retirement, Dad is wearing a bolo tie and looks shrunken, frail. I liked to kiss him on the top of his bony head in the desert mornings. He took all of us to a game only once, my first. I was 10. Charlie was 8, Lindsay was 12, and the baby was left home. We drove all the way from South Dakota up to Minneapolis to see the Twins play the Yankees, my team. Daddy was a refugee from Nazi Germany, and Mom was English. They were grown-ups who'd never seen a game either. They went because he was the father of Americans, and I was a little baseball fanatic. Mom sat quietly for about 20 minutes, fanning herself with a straw sun hat and beaming, then asked, "When does the game begin?" "Look down there," we said. It was already the second inning. But I still don't think she spotted it. I think she was waiting for the play-by-play, the familiar radio sounds so different in the ballpark. Daddy wore plaid shorts over his white skinny legs and puffed a cigar. He began to like baseball when he found someone who knew less about it than he did. He explained it all to Mom, mostly according to his own logic. He had an accountant's sense of symmetry, and the diamond pleased him. The profusion of numbers and their richness impressed him, the implication of infinity, and it was a damn nice summer day. I think now of those bleachers, old Metropolitan Stadium full of stolid Scandinavians who never corrected him. That would have spoiled their fun. Mom would ask, "Where's that chap running off to now?" And Dad would explain, "He goes home because he has nowhere else to go." My brother and I spent most of the game under the stands scrapping with baby Twinkies, Twins fans who didn't take to our rooting for the enemy. Charlie thinks he remembers a game-winning Bobby Richardson grand slam. I only recall the Yanks winning in the 10th and the incredibly intense luxury of that lagniappe inning. Daddy stuck with baseball too, like the voting that made him proudest as a naturalized citizen. He quietly exulted in being able to talk to his kids about what they liked to talk about, which was sports. What pleasure it gave him to be able to call those Sunday calls, this is later, after we'd all left home, and say, "So, Mattingly's still leading the league," or "I see where the Yankees aren't doing too well." But tonight, there's an amazing comeback, another 10th inning heroic to call home about. I see where the Yankees are going great guns, though it's a few second basemen later, and the serene and splendid Willie Randolph who pulls it out for the team. So as Patricia mentioned, I grew up in South Dakota. I was born and raised there. I'm wearing my Sioux York shirt, which probably only one person in the world owns, and that would be me. I don't know why it exists. And so I'm not Norwegian myself, but I have cousins who are Norwegian, and I was an honorary Norwegian, you know, in my friends, because everybody there is like Danish, Swedish, Norwegian. And then one day a few years ago, I just started studying Norwegian, so that's what I do now. So I'm going to read a couple of poems that have to do with that. The first one is Cursing in Norwegian. Honestly, I didn't think you could swear på norsk. Those liberal, uptight Norman, what do they have to cuss about? Honestly, Elle, don't be a dritzek. Well, okay, but it doesn't sound like bad language. I mean, I can believe en hjem is a home and milk is milk, but knulla, mukashering, laken samba, that's just cute. Sheet dancing. Let's invent the mother rule, Moors regelen. Can I say it to your mom? Wait, what? I can't make up a Norwegian word? Hvorfor ikke? Why not? If I can't swear, I can't talk, you flip-flop flat top. So this is a poem I wrote in Norwegian, but I'll read my English translation, it's very short, and then the Norwegian, just so you can hear the beautiful language. The Norwegian Sleeping Library. A room on a street to lie down with a book. Lamp throws apricot light on the bed. We doze and drift and doze. Horace, a poet of another dimension, orders a whiskey sour. De norska sova biblioteka. Et rom på en gate og legger seg ned med en bok. Lampen kaster et aprikoslys på sengen. Vi duster og driver og duser. Horace, en dikter av en annen dimensjon, bestiller en whisky sur. So I started this magazine, Eulabor, with Maureen Owen about a year ago. She was in New York, and we were just like, oh, you know, we just want to do like a throwback magazine, you know, like those days of the Mimeo magazine. So let's just do something without, like, you know, not stapled, not perfect bound, and we're just going to write to a bunch of people and say, send us a poem like today, and we'll put it in the magazine. So we did Eulabor, and Maureen was hoping, or was, you know, invited to come today, but couldn't make it because she lives in Colorado and she has COVID for the first time. So she asked me, and so I'm going to read this poem by her that's in Eulabor too, and then I'll read my Norwegian translation, and then we'll be done with the Norwegian. So this is Maureen Owen's poem. Whenever I snow, I think of Black Beauty when he was pulling a cab, standing streetside under a lamppost, his dark harness gathering flakes, a jet horse becoming white, powder, a dark horse disappearing. Når jeg snør, jeg tenker på svart skjønnhet, da han dro en drosje, stående gatekanten, under en lyktestupe, hans mørke celle samler flak, en bekksvart hest blir hvit pulver, en mørk hest forsvinner. And I'm just going to read a couple more poems, and then that'll be that. I also love snow, so here's a snow poem. Snow will do this. Make a man wear a hat. Make a woman long for dead weasels to wrap around her neck. Another to fly to Florida. Snow conceals the mundane and reveals the germane. Snow is what we long for. Snow as white as drifts of sleep. On a bar stool. The government walks in talking about Bob Dylan. A man and a dog snicker. The light is low, the mood is sour. Who knows who goes to the swinging John door to peep at the skinny girls hauling up their socks, who follow a large-headed, handsome man in a goose-step jacket and a line of talk, pulling us into the past like blue comes to cheese. The barkeep can't believe another round for the house, another government for Bob and me. Poem. When the war came at last, we were too old to fight. We could only wait behind locked doors for the enemy to burst in. We slipped out at dawn to beg. We ran to the river to see the soldiers in their masks. Were they smiling? Did they see us? Failure left us vulnerable. Our successes left us. We wanted the past to beam on our careless beauty. We had nothing to give as cannon fodder, numbers, gurneys. No one wanted what we didn't have. We slept and woke as old people do. We slept until we were young. And the last poem I'm going to read is called Cab of Mirth. Like House of Mirth, only Cab of Mirth. I can never say that, so it sounds like, anyway, Cab of Mirth. I don't know how to say that title. Somebody else has to come up and say my title for me. Men come and go on Earth and in NYC. They go in taxis. I go on a bicycle, and Johnny stays home. He stays put and stays ahead of me by 9 years, and so many look out the car window to see who is living their young person life. Clouds come and go over Manhattan. The years of clouds have arrived in a taxi, and the universe, candy-colored, smirks and tells a joke about suspenders. And time awaits. The meter is running. Thank you.
We're going to read a few poems of Jordan Davis, and the one that was published in this wonderful magazine.
You thought you got rid of me, but I'm back. Okay, so this is Jordan Davis's poem that was in Eulabor 1. Eulabor, like Yule log, Yule, but bor, B-O-R-D, so it means table, but the D is basically, in Norwegian, basically leave out the D's and you'll be right more often than not. Like in French, where you leave out every third letter. In Norwegian, it's just the D. 3 free throws. Feelings. What's that code for? I know a few states of mood. Dutiful, in which I wait to be loved. Fearful, in which I imagine I will not be loved. Lonely, in which I run around in circles, barking. And free, in which I run in a straight line and change direction when I feel like it. Tap, tap, tap. The skyscraper dips its nib in cloud and dreams a bit about what it wants to ignore today. I woke up tired again and decided to have toast to celebrate. A little turmeric and ginger, a little coffee. It felt wonderful and ordinary. The hateful kind of thing poems are always telling us is the best we can expect as they go off laughing into eternal life without us.
Thank you for really bringing the question of generation into the room too. And I'm going to read 2 short poems by Jordan Davis. And so the first poem is called My Orphan Villae. Whammo! Everything hits at once. Daylight, sky, blue, whammo! Smoke off the ground, shoots, buds, fruit. Whack swat. Girl and boys, roads, fields, cats, people, boom, love, pow, joy. Paved poems. I love to see a new horizon when the building by the road's in ruin. I wish I was a kid with the others on the curb, watching the steamroller give off smoke and move on. The huge noise of it sounds to a friend of mine like motorboats showing off across the harbor. Is this what poets are for, I wonder, to share at the old ripped up road and predict wet, shiny pavements? And all good to Jordan Davies. And now I would like to invite Rona Cran, who's co-produced this wonderful event. And Rona has worked so wonderfully for poetry and for the New York School of Poetry. This collection is I Remember Kim.
Gosh, thank you. I don't really do this, so it's a little bit scary to be up here. But I just want to start by reading a poem by John Yao, who was also supposed to be one of our readers today, but who is actually in Shanghai at the moment, so can't be here for that reason. This is Hearsay Song by John Yao. They are dying out, and I want to reach them before they are gone. Not that I know what I would say to them when I get there, their songs rippling beneath temporary sky as I approach, as I am doing now, even though I am nowhere near wherever they are, swirling in blossoming dust and dreaming they are not. They are dying out, and I want to reach them before they are gone, just as I want to reach myself before I too am gone. Another blossom sliding into slime. What notes do I hear, drenched in fiery sky? Are these ghosts rising up before me, or gasps of dust near a lake covered by algae? They are dying out, and I want to reach them before their names vanish, before they become ghosts dying in pink algae and ruined vowels. Not that I know what their songs say, telling sting of monstrous human torrent, wheeling above burning story of lost lives, tapering branches of smoke, red and yellow leaves falling. They are dying out, and I want to reach them before my name joins theirs in plastic matrimony, before a blue-eyed undertaker powders my nose, or I turn to powder in squirt gun of unprofitable insects, secrets folded away, never rinsed in scum corner, history erasing traces of its nothing new. So thanks to John Yao for that. And I'll read a little from my little book about my sister in just a moment, but I also, just because Nick mentioned him, wanted to read a Lorenzo Thomas poem as well. 2,713 and a half, I think that's right, what the title is. The cruelty of ages past affects us now. Whoever it was who lived here lived a mean life. Each door has locks designed for keys unknown. Our living room was once somebody's home, our bedroom someone's only room. Our kitchen had a hasp upon its door. Door to a kitchen, and our lives are hasped and boundaried because of ancient locks and madnesses of slumlord greed and desperate privacies. Which one is madness? Depends on who you are. We find we cannot stay, the both of us, in the same room, dance like electrons out of each other's way. The cruelties of ages past affect us now. Okay, so I'll just read a little from this book, I Remember Kim, which came out at the end of September. Just a bit from the preface, just to kind of contextualize it. On October 18th, 2021, my little sister Kim died suddenly at night from complications relating to type 1 diabetes. Complications I still don't quite understand. She was 32. She lived in Santa Catalina in Panama. She was a scuba diving instructor. This small book is an attempt to give shape to my grief. And of course, I borrow its form from Joe Brainerd. There have been other I Remembers, and this is mine. At heart, it is what its title suggests. It's a memoir about my sister. It's a collage of memories covering the 32, nearly 33 years that she was in my life, from the day that she was born to the night that she died. And it's kind of made up in lots of ways. It's like a kind of tissue of quotations that kind of came to me as I was writing it. Because it's also, to borrow from David Wojnarowicz, a memoir of disintegration, of dissolution, embodied or enacted in that Brainerd form, that relentless and kind of fragmentary form, and also in the fact that it doesn't know if it's a poem or a letter or a memoir or something else. As Marita Sturken writes, memory establishes life's continuity. It gives meaning to the present as each moment is constituted by the past. And Kim's death kind of altered all of my memories. A constant in my life, I now feel her absence, even in recollecting moments or events in which she wasn't present. As Brad Gooch writes, I'm not nostalgic, just shocked. It was written piecemeal by hand in a notebook given to me by a friend over many months and on many train journeys. And it sticks more or less to Joe Brainerd's method in order to kind of overcome this sense of having lost control. To quote William Carlos Williams, no one to witness and adjust, no one to drive the car. I remember when you were born. You were my first memory. I was 4. While there has been and will be life for me after you, there was none at all before. 3 sisters, 3, the magic number, 3 witches, the power of 3, a triangle, the strongest shape, 3 sisters, the tenderest, toughest place on earth. I remember when shall we 3 meet again? I remember who is the third who always walks beside you. I remember that one of the first things that I thought or felt when Sophie told me that you had been found without a heartbeat or without a pulse, I don't remember which, I do remember which, was that I don't know how to be not in a 3. I remember the only thing to do is simply continue. Is that simple? Yes, it is simple because it is the only thing to do. Can you do it? Yes, you can because it is the only thing to do. O'Hara. I remember the stars are not wanted now, put out every one, pack up the moon and dismantle the sun, pour away the ocean and sweep up the wood, for nothing now can ever come to any good. Auden. I remember trying to understand how a person vanishes, Notley. I remember it's so meaningless to eat, O'Hara. I remember 2 weeks after you died, a Monday, almost to the hour, going to Brighton to swim in the sea. The weekend had been stormy. There were signs all over the beach, warning against swimming. But I swam, partly to try and reach you, partly to feel the sharp, icy drench of the surf and so forget. The sea at Brighton relishes its power, like an athlete at the height of their powers, like a young, dark cat, like the large brown gulls who soar on the wind. The water is strong and swiftly deep and cold, of course, and clear, and the millions of large pebbles that comprise the long sloping beach roil noisily under its surf. Around the groins, 2 swimmers warned, there have been drownings. I remember that it was difficult to leave the water, the profound, seductive suck, the shifting earth, my sense that you were somewhere in this moving water too, that all seas are connected. The sky was a bright, impossible Nilgiri blue, I remember, and afterwards we went for sushi. I remember Adwaith, another power of three. I remember Let's Eat Grandma. I remember First Aid Kit. I remember Patti Smith. I remember Pup. I remember the sensation of falling off the round, turning world, Elizabeth Bishop. I remember my life held precariously in the seeing hands of others. I remember it has been 5 weeks. I remember this time yesterday. I remember this time 1 week ago, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4, 5, 6, 7, 24, 30. I remember you and me and Martin sinking 4 bottles of red wine at the gun, sitting outside, COVID, using a stick we'd found on the pavement to keep turning the overhead heater on. I remember going for old fashions with Martin on the 33rd floor of the Shard in your honour. They were good but made too quickly, far below the London Bridge interchange. I remember changing trains there to come visit you when you lived in Croydon. I remember you asking me for my passport number in the summer over WhatsApp. You were in Panama City, staying in a container hotel and applying for residency and a bank account. Some people were having loud sex next door. I was at Trent Bridge watching the cricket. You needed my passport number because you were listing me as the beneficiary for $30,000 worth of life insurance on your new Panamanian bank account. I replied, sending the number, saying, I remember, please don't die. You replied, I remember, haha, might be worth it, smiley face, thanks a ton. I remember, though we never got the money anyway, it's not worth it. I remember you and I are suddenly what the trees try to tell us we are, that their merely being there means something. John Ashbery. I remember that all the things people have said to me about you since you died are true. I remember that grief, like the ocean, is not something to be mastered or survived, but to be navigated. I remember that St. Brendan of Clonfert is the patron saint of sailors, divers, adventurers, travellers, and whales. I remember that diving is a poetic act, pivoting on creativity and control. I remember that some fish move like birds in murmurations. I remember the breath taken, the ascent. I remember the weight of emptiness. I remember washing your clothes on our return from Panama, hanging them up, being surrounded by material evidence that you had existed, here and not here. I remember transferring some of your ashes and some sand from Coiba, still wet, into the little glass bottle that Michelle had given me. I remember that I carried some of your ashes home with me in a small Chanel makeup bag. I remember one winter evening going upstairs, opening the cubed, carved wooden jewelry box into which I'd placed you, lifting you out and holding you in my hand, all that's left, etc. Inside the Chanel bag, a small plastic baggie. You looked like drugs. I rolled the bag between my finger and thumb, held it up to the light, the better to contemplate that curious mix of fine grey ash and little hunks of black and white matter. I remember that the ocean is not empty. I remember that there is no horizon underwater. I remember isn't every ending absolute to those who live through it? Jessie Greengrass. I remember that you used to swim at a Lido somewhere in North London, but I can't remember where. I remember how lost can you be when everywhere you turn it's morning and the sun's coming up? Bernadette Mayer. I remember, but grief is darker. It is a wig that does not rest gently on my head. Essex Hemphill. I remember there are cracks in all directions. I remember I want someone else to die, not someone close to me, someone close to someone else. I remember the heat and confusion of living, which is the only answer to death. Audre Lorde. I remember the anger too. How dare they die and leave us alone to deal with all this shit, with no one to complain to? Herbert Muschamp. I remember Sasha's place, a bench in Victoria Park, with a plaque on it which reads, "All welcome, rest, be easy, you are safe, love lives here." I remember the story blows away, and what can you do howling without a script? Ashbury. I remember how much of this I've remembered and written whilst on tube journeys to see friends. I remember almost everyone will experience grief, that those of us who do are the lucky ones, to have loved, to continue to live. I remember that the pandemic has bereaved the world, that I am just one of a number. I remember the bodies that I have seen, the man on the Nakuru highway in Lynette, hit by a car, Nonna in her lovely makeup and funeral regalia, Aki, the brown cat, cruelly dead under the bridge in the pre-dawn drizzle. I did not see your body, though I tried to imagine what it, you, looked like all the time. I wonder what your last moments were like. I wish I had had the opportunity to bathe your body, to prepare you for whatever came next, though neither of us believed that anything did, to talk to you, to enact some of the ease and familiarity, even after death, of sharing makeup tips, hair oil, perfume, even each other's clothes. I wish I had been able to unfurl a clean white sheet around your body. I remember imagining you watching the drama of your death unfold. I can't imagine you simply disappearing. I remember, how could he be so present one moment and altogether gone the next? How could a life so strong be simply annihilated? David Gear. I remember, it's not uncommon. The dead are frequently unable to accept their condition. They resemble the living in that respect, but they have forgotten what they're nostalgic for. Much is lost in the crossing over. Damon Galgut. I remember, will I meet your ghost? I remember that I keep a handful of your ashes as a talisman of memory and good luck. I remember they existed, we can be, Maya Angelou. I remember, why do I tell you these things? You are not even here. John Ashbury. Thanks.
And now we're going to finish this section with poems from the great, great poet from Queens, Paolo Javier. And in a way, he brings an awful lot of the generations together, and really, for me, feels like the going forth of the New York school. Paolo.
There's an echo here, right? Does that make it better? Is it better this way? Still an echo? Thank you so much, Rona and Yasmin. I want to give a big shout out to Yasmin, who's one of the organizers, isn't here, is I think in Amman, in Jordan. And just thinking about you and wishing you and your family safety. I was talking to Rona. One of the main reasons why I love the New York School is because I learn so much every time I read their poetry. So I really take that school part seriously. And my day job is I'm a school teacher. So that's very poignant for me to continue to be influenced by the New York School. And also it's through Frank O'Hara that I became aware of the poets in Ghana, Jean Genet, right? And I'm really curious about Mike Kanemitsu. Does anyone know about Mike Kanemitsu's story? Dying to learn more about it. Proposal for Socrates Sculpture Park, Paolo Javier. In 2009, Paris-based filmmaker Gilles Elie Cossack introduced the world to the extraordinary life of Robert Saint Rose in his playful, semi-fictional documentary Zétoile, 2008. In the mid-1970s, Robert Saint Rose, a great admirer of Aimé Césaire, set up a senseless project to be the first Frenchman in space in a Martinique entangled in social problems. Quote, "The country is a mess," he tells his brother. "I must go to space." Hugues Saint Rose, Robert's brother, recalls, quote, "One day he came home and said he had seen Americans walking on the moon. So, in 1974, he announced he would be the first Martinician to walk on the moon," end quote. In Hugues' backyard, they assemble a homemade rocket ship from dismantled parts of Robert's brand new car. Tapping into the Antilleans' magical relationship to language, Robert then announces, quote, "I'll read Césaire, I'll sing Césaire so that the rockets lift off." He times his historic flight to the moon during American President Gerald Ford's 1974 visit to Fort-de-France for a series of meetings with French President Valéry Giscard d'Estaing. On December 14, 1974, attired in a homemade spacesuit, Saint Rose climbs aboard his ship at dawn and begins chanting Césaire's poetry out loud, which continues throughout the day and into night. Though his spaceship never achieves liftoff, on December 15, Robert Saint Rose vanishes from the island nation, never to be seen or heard from again. I am confident that Elie de Cossac's tale of secret yearnings and abandoned potentiality, and of the power of poetic language to fuel one's dreams of flight and escape to new realities, will engage a cross-section of audiences from the literary, scientific, academic, and humanitarian fields. To this end, I have begun work on an interdisciplinary project that dreams of realizing this spaceship fueled by poetry. It is a project that burrows right into the heart of poetry and language and considers in a unique way what continues to give literature and human language its power to change the course of human history. Toward the dream machine of Robert Saint Rose, for Gilles de Cossack. Can you hear me okay? About petty matters, all aboard the ship of small nations. Fattened by disease, ghoulish flicks, ghoulish car wash, fattening should defeat the land and lords of these hauntings of lesser experience. Fattened monies of gray-green wipe out more than a million, full stop. Then you must turn me into a poem, greener for parody and science perdition. You will need calm, like the face of an ephemeral dune whose moment conjoins, ambrose beer spreading, effluvient dune for chance, hands-free lasso. The eye nourishes the wind. The eye is a delicate number you intend to return the navel of the other's coast where disorder is a flavor tormenting all. You conjoin genitives. You don't trifle with savannas of questions. You were on the furthest margin looking inward. Every day, profound dancing won over language because the inverse of the 20th Penrose flower saddens the mason jar. More insolence on par with precaution. Now, the force you encounter is a petroglyph of ambient crepuscularity. Hans Arp entering into night, or your days as the sacrificial sun, venereal hours welcome. How do you board the ship of small nation building? When you do, are you dancing alone like a soul's voice, discography, language, image, voyant nation yearning, absorbent patchouli to move Césaire out of the Antillean situation? Césaire, solar, fuel ship, meter, energy, verbal envoy, particle, physical formation. Robert Saint Rose, unreeling, dynamite of Virgil, alcohol, eschews dancing, body set bare, dance of fistula, deception, hashtag lyric. Build a ship of small nation where fragile panther tears humiliating across chthonic escalation, whose waters part attachments to mural of sun and island. Question of billionth monument, build vessel article extreme trumpet utility decay, Sharon of blasted cistern martyrology. question of monument to the past whose flowers sing of Fanon set parts, repellent dance, inutile wind, calm the crises of parakeet billboards. Hashtag lyrics unveil viaduct, livery cabs, overtly English. Each disaffectee unveil misery for soused scarabs. I can't go back to this language. Build a vessel, overthrow sentence in view of necktie, flower, pistol, folderol, to refuse clarity, devastation, summary, glacial riot. How do you build a vessel? Well, you enter it. Get hold of an idea. No one on earth can make you change your mind. Stand up. One day sight of Americans on the moon. I want. I can. 2. Deep down in the Antillean imagination, here in Queens, my family sleeps. I wake up each morning at 5 to greet the poem I can't wait for. I never heave. On the train, I read feverishly, tickle nose, Chow Mo Wan, renting a daybed in lean boxer briefs. Aboard this ship, the humble nation themselves, cities played a tale of 3 butchers, their song of bon mot's inertia of estouffee, soused down, far down geometric crux of eternalism. Recommence docile song, sorting through mute contrarian doubt, falconry. The eye is inescapable of reducing ruptures in sauna and Florida. Aboard this ship in city for tales to place, and in city, inert your villainy. Its found dream descending atonement for past, where coterie cries without arm sling. I mean, of course, the poem like Seti, S-E-T-I, villain among sonic movement, hung dance. Whose quietude in sand dune brackets face alone. I understand the volume of parcel cries they send, showing some signs as whistle. Parcel question they send for habitation. And this city we'll invent, in event of our villainy. Its foul dream, no strong cog, nor hunger for misery, revolution haze. Its fatally extravagant bandmate. 3. San Rose, dreaming the Antillean imaginary, knowing Césaire, solar, secretion, yearning, potency. Build thee ship with me, where we are treeless to wander beyond sense. Is the eye free to go? Is the eye being detained? I'd rather not speak with you now. The eye wants to excuse its right to remain silent. Aboard this ship, we do not open door. We ask to see the door. Do not open this door. We remain silent. We do not arm sling anything in ice. In poem, you have inertia. In Queen's, estrangement fools you into questioning sentence passivity, fragrant with past habit of discovery. In poetry, landscape is a business model. Aboard your machine, we must have a plan, dovetail list of contacts so our families have all we need in event the academy shows up to carbon freeze this poetry. Aboard the St. Rose, poems, Milky Ways, the eye wants space for lighting family. Césaire, Solar, Saya, Mama, Lyra, time in and out. Charon gliding across Hellgate, Robert St. Rose vanishing, the day promised to fly own rocket to moon. Solar Césaire, erase punctuation, poem emboldened. Whether Robert St. Rose lives is beside the poem. Lesson of machine designs on the power of the poem, language and Antillean found imaginary, marvelous capacity to transcend every site of nation building. Language builder from manufactured vehicles stripped down to burnish, then body forth a dream. Is the eye obsessed with poem embalming your many vessel? I would never push you or anyone to inhabit either. Too self-conscious, the eye knows too well where scrap parts beach the yacht. Inert city, whose enjambment no syntax plates, no simile phrase. Colonialism outfit one discovers too late in point of descending castration. Oh, futility, this cave. Its folktale, you know, make air and foul folktales. One seems to cohere before each surrender, as if perfecting a moment solely with body bends mind towards the song. Don't think for a moment that its energy unfamiliar, not unlike daring language, too embarrassed to publish. When printing is cheaper these days, doubt is the water at the bottom of the well. Your lyric cadence interpolation with brusque commentary under cloak of rain, hypothetical elegies. The I intimates order, will deny tombs of purpose. Oh, but that caesura seconds ago gives youth relief, don't it? Hypotaxis, syntax, why punctuation? When time is eternalism's hearth impossible to stop, where rapid signs do your order adjective before noun, then, like you engrave syntax, your statement, gravity's passage into relief again, there, that pause. Blake's Urizen indents lesser enjambment. Descartes on performance enhancement. Down valley where sun sets its dew late foil, drunk eye neither, participant origin desiccate imprimatur sex, to affirm the liberty of a great journey, descent into terror sign. I am proposing a liberator figure, not a gift of liberation, of peer blanching. No one's conquistador, not semaphore nor scaly liberty near a settling audience. Sunrise equals name of ship projection, narrative to it greater than space/ship ruins. A memorial for Saya sick, coughed through half the night, the eye fearful she might contract pneumonia, Bonnie Bell's toddler after Isra passed on what Lyra gave her, Kubo winds up with it in ER. The eye needs to reach out, wish them well. The eye hopes we don't argue about bringing Saya to see Dr. Mahdi tomorrow. She should not be attending school today. When you write against overwhelming distrust of own ability to locate space in the language for dreaming, it isn't liberation you seek aboard the St. Rose. If we give ourselves the title of dreamer, then we must act on it. Robert St. Rose's own dimensions inhabit the poem, dream, reader, mirror. The eye wakes up, moves through afternoon, lays awake night terrors. My daughter dreams in language that find their way out of spaceship. Robert St. Rose incantation by invention. The son of Césaire, enough to vanish you into worlds you seek refuge. Build this dream machine. St. Rose breaks you down into part earth. What value is the automobile in Tyhe against the mourning of the poem? Thank you.
I just want to end by thanking Paolo and Rona, Jordan, Elinor, and Jean-Yo for showing, which is the most important thing, is that the poem, the New York School drove forth, and that it's still so alive, and it's the language, the magic that we've heard in this last session just anyway blew me away. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Patricia. Thank you, Rona and Paolo and Elinor. We are now taking the shortest break ever. Smoke them if you got them. Run to the bathroom. And then our penultimate reading with John Godfrey, if you can stick around, and, and Tillman and Bob Rosenthal, and we'll convene.